The air in the assembly hall of Northwood Academy was thick with the scent of cheap varnish, anxious sweat, and the faint, sweet perfume of graduation lilies. Elias Vance stood precisely at the center of the stage, framed by a banner that declared in shimmering gold vinyl, "Class of 2026, Future Leaders of Tomorrow." He didn't feel like a future leader. He felt like a finely crafted museum exhibit, polished, admired, and utterly trapped behind glass. Elias was the embodiment of the Northwood dream. 4 years, a 4.98 weighted GPA, 32 advanced placement credits, captain of the debate team, founder of the Astrophysics Club, and inevitably, the Valedictorian. His acceptance letters lay in a neat, imposing stack on his desk at home. Harvard, Stanford, Yale, a full ride to anywhere he chose. He had chosen Harvard. That was the official, universally celebrated truth. The real truth, the truth that felt like a coiled knot of pure, exhilarating tension in his stomach, was zipped into a black leather portfolio hidden at the bottom of his lacrosse bag. It wasn't a Harvard course schedule. It was a Marine Corps Delayed Entry Program contract, MOS 0311, Infantry. He watched Ms. Albright, the guidance counselor, pacing below the stage, clutching a clipboard like a talisman. She was currently lecturing the salutatorian, a brilliant but perpetually disorganized girl named Maya, on the importance of projection and gravitas during the commencement address. "Elias, you are the gold standard," Ms. Albright had purred to him earlier that morning, adjusting the lapel of his graduation robe. "The town is buzzing. Remember your message: intellectual rigor, the promise of American opportunity, and the responsibility to return and give back to Northwood." Return and give back. The phrase tasted like ash. For 4 years, Elias had been sculpting the perfect public persona, a marble statue of academic excellence. Every class, every competition, every volunteer hour was a deliberate, necessary chip in the stone. It wasn't about achievement, it was about camouflage. The perfect grades were not a goal, but a shield, a mechanism to deflect any probing questions about his future, a way to ensure everyone was so blinded by his brilliance that they never noticed he was quietly plotting an escape route. He looked out at the rows of empty chairs, mentally rehearsing his speech. It was flawless, it was inspiring, it was a total lie. And as we leave these hallowed halls for the illustrious corridors of higher education, let us remember that knowledge is the armor we carry into the complexities of the modern world. He despised the word illustrious. He craved the word grit. He wanted the complexity of physical exhaustion, of actual peril, of a world where his value was not determined by his ability to recall the dates of the Congress of Vienna, but by his ability to carry a 70-pound pack for 20 miles. His father, an attorney who specialized in complex corporate mergers, saw the Marine Corps as a phase, a rebellious, ill-advised gap year that could be purchased out of with a large enough donation to the right congressional campaign. His mother, a tenured professor of literature, simply refused to acknowledge the possibility. His enlistment was a silent, radical declaration of independence. He had signed the papers, passed the physicals, and met his recruiter, Staff Sergeant Ramos, at a nondescript Denny's 50 miles away, using the excuse of a fictional debate tournament in a neighboring county. His ship date was set for 3 weeks after graduation. He would vanish into boot camp before anyone had time to process or protest. The plan was perfect. He just needed to survive the next 48 hours. The day of graduation dawned with the blinding, uncompromising clarity of a high-definition documentary. The sun beat down on the freshly mown lawn, and the air was alive with the sound of camera shutters and forced, tearful laughter. Elias was seated on the stage, his starched white collar digging into his neck, surrounded by 97 of his peers. The principal, Dr. Harrington, A man whose face was a roadmap of parental grievances and budget cuts was droning through the acknowledgements. And of course, our valedictorian, Elias Vance, whose scholarly accomplishments have secured Northwood's reputation for yet another year. Elias, we are so incredibly proud to send you off to Harvard, where you will undoubtedly shape the future of this great nation. Elias managed a serene, practiced smile. The smile was a high-functioning piece of emotional infrastructure, built to withstand disappointment, fear, and now the crushing weight of public deception. He thought about the black folder. He had placed it carefully under his seat cushion. It was a mistake, he knew, to bring it at all. But Staff Sergeant Ramos had insisted Elias keep the final copy of the orders and the medical waiver form with him. Don't let anything stop you, Vance. Not until you're on the bus. Not the day before, not the hour before. Ramos had advised, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. The civilian world has a way of swallowing good men before they even start. Elias had reasoned that the stage, with its strict security and the constant admiring presence of his parents in the front row, was the safest place in the world. Who would look under the valedictorian seat? His parents, Eleanor and Marcus Vance, looked magnificent in their tailored outfits. Eleanor's eyes were glistening, not with pride, Elias knew, but with the satisfaction of a project completed flawlessly. Marcus was already taking calls on his silent vibrate phone, no doubt discussing potential business connections in Boston, where Elias was supposedly heading in the fall. And now, a moment we have all anticipated, Dr. Harrington announced, his voice momentarily cracking with genuine excitement. Please welcome to the podium the Northwood Academy class of 2026 valedictorian, Elias Vance. Elias stood up. He smoothed his robe, stepped to the microphone and paused. He looked out at the crowd, the sea of hopeful, expectant faces, the proud, oblivious faces of his parents, and for a split second, the facade fractured. He saw the enormity of the lie he was about to tell and the weight of the truth he was about to unleash. He began, his voice calm, clear, and perfectly modulated. Distinguished faculty, proud families, and my fellow graduates, the speech was going exactly as planned. He hit the intellectual high notes, referencing Seneca, discussing the ethical imperatives of AI, weaving in a few self-deprecating but charming anecdotes about late-night study sessions. The audience was enthralled. His mother dabbed a tear. His father gave a curt, approving nod. It was during the final swelling climax of the speech, the part about pioneering new frontiers, that the chaos began. Maya, the salutatorian, was known for two things: her brilliance in theoretical physics and her uncanny ability to trip over flat surfaces. As Elias reached the crescendo, he saw Maya walking toward the podium, holding a bottle of water he had forgotten. She was trying to be helpful. She was trying to be discreet. She was also wearing heels for the first time. She tripped on the edge of the stage riser carpet. It wasn't a hard fall, but it was enough to send a ripple of sound through the solemn occasion. As she stumbled, she reached out, grabbing the nearest solid object to steady herself. The nearest solid object was the back of Elias's chair, which rested directly over his bag and the hidden folder. The chair scraped forward with a hideous shrieking noise, pulling the black leather portfolio out from under the cushion. It landed on the highly polished floor with a dull thwack. The impact, or perhaps the sheer pressure of the moment, was enough to spring the portfolio open. Elias stopped speaking mid-sentence. His eyes, and then the eyes of Principal Harrington, who was seated directly behind him, dropped to the floor. The audience, thinking it was merely a dropped item, waited patiently for Elias to continue his inspiring words. But Elias couldn't speak. He could only stare at the documents that had spilled onto the pristine wooden stage. The first was the official letter from the Commandant of the Marine Corps. It was an unmistakable cream color with a massive embossed seal in the upper left corner. The second, lying directly on top of the first, was a thick, glossy white booklet that declared in stark, non-negotiable black font, United States Marine Corps, enlistment contract, DD Form 41. The seal of the eagle, globe and anchor was visible to the first 4 rows, and for one agonizing, endless second in the hushed, expectant hall, the only sound was the clicking of 1,000 mental processes simultaneously crashing. Principal Harrington's jaw went slack. Eleanor Vance let out a small, strangled gasp that was entirely audible in the silence. Marcus Vance did not move, but the blood drained so completely from his face that the change was visible even from the stage. Elias, the golden boy, looked down at his shattered life plan lying at his feet. The words on the contract, so bold and physical, finally drowned out the elegant lie of his valedictory speech. He took a deep breath, tossed his prepared speech notes to the side, and stepped away from the microphone. The Marine Corps contract, the new focal point of the entire ceremony. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice now entirely his own, stripped of academic pretense, and projected with the confidence of a man who had already chosen his path. "I won't be going to Harvard." The ensuing chaos was not a roar, but a cascading series of shocked murmurs, like dominoes falling in slow motion. The cameras, initially focused on the valedictorian's shining face, now dipped to capture the documents on the floor, the unmistakable emblem of the Marines. Dr. Harrington, a man whose entire administrative career was based on avoiding lawsuits and scandals, moved with surprising speed. He scrambled to the papers, snatching them up as if they were live ordnance. "Mr. Vance, please, continue your speech. This is not the time for this," he hissed, his face mottled purple. He was already calculating the damage. The Alumni Association, the College Board, the parents who had held up Elias as a standard. But the moment was gone. Elias had claimed the stage, and the truth had claimed the narrative. "With all due respect, Doctor," Elias said, his voice now projected naturally, carrying over the stunned silence. He was talking to the crowd, not the principal. "The speech I prepared was a prospectus for a life I've decided not to live. It was based on the expectation that I would follow a safe, predictable path of intellectual engagement." He gestured vaguely toward the place where the contract had lain. "The truth is, I need something that requires more than my intellect, something that demands my entire self." He looked directly at his parents in the front row. His mother, Eleanor, was weeping silently, her hands pressed over her mouth. His father, Marcus, looked less angry than he looked betrayed, as if Elias had just announced he was liquidating the family fortune. "I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps 6 months ago," Elias stated, making it sound final, unalterable. "My commitment is to the infantry. I ship out in 3 weeks." A woman in the third row, the mother of the class vice president, actually fanned herself vigorously. The rest of the ceremony was a blur of hurried, awkward procedures. Dr. Harrington, realizing he couldn't physically remove the valedictorian without causing an even greater scene, simply cut the address short and moved straight into the awarding of diplomas. The entire event tainted by the unexpected declaration of war, not against a foreign power, but against suburban conformity. As Elias walked off the stage, his diploma rolled tightly in his hand. He was met not by congratulatory hugs, but by a cordon of furious authority figures. "Elias, my office now," Dr. Harrington commanded, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Elias, we are going home. Immediately." His father's voice, cold and lethal, sliced through the noise. This was the voice he used when a major merger was falling apart. He looked at his parents, his mother's face a mask of disappointment, his father's a picture of controlled fury. He knew what was coming. It would be a legal, financial, and emotional siege designed to force a renegotiation of his contract. But Elias Vance, the perfect student, had already learned the lesson of commitment. He had signed the papers and he had learned to stand his ground. "I'll meet you there," Elias said to his father, a small revolutionary smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. "I need to go thank Sergeant Ramos. He's waiting in the parking lot." The mention of the recruiter seemed to break the last of Marcus Vance's control. "You will do no such thing. You have jeopardized your entire future for a whim. Get in the car." Elias held up a hand. The tension around him felt real, sharp, and infinitely more satisfying than the abstract stress of the SATs. "No, sir. I'm going to meet the man who gave me a new path," Elias said. He turned his back on the stage, the principal and his parents, and walked directly toward the double doors, heading not for Harvard, but for the boot prints in the mud. The recruiter, Staff Sergeant Ramos, was leaning against a black, unmarked Dodge Charger at the far end of the parking lot, away from the flow of luxury SUVs. He wasn't in uniform. He wore a sharp, dark polo shirt and slacks, looking less like a military operative and more like a quiet man who knew how to wait. When he saw Elias emerge, still in his graduation robe, the sergeant didn't move, but a single approving nod crossed the asphalt. Elias walked toward him, the applause and angry murmurs fading behind the heavy gymnasium doors. He felt a sudden, profound lightness, the relief of gravity finally taking hold after years of floating on the surface of expectation. "Well, Vance," Ramos said, straightening up as Elias reached him, "that was a bit more dramatic than the standard exit interview. Congratulations, you made a statement." "Sorry about the lack of discretion, Staff Sergeant," Elias replied, the title feeling more natural than Mr. Vance. "I didn't plan for a stage dive." "No apologies, you stood up. That's what matters." Ramos's eyes, however, were not on Elias, but over his shoulder. "Looks like the welcoming committee is here, and they are not happy about the lack of organic champagne." Marcus Vance and Eleanor swept across the blacktop with the coordinated intensity of a hostile takeover. Marcus's face was a mask of cold strategy, his expensive suit jacket already off and slung over Eleanor's arm. "You," Marcus said, stopping 2 feet from Ramos. He didn't shout. His voice was dangerously low, carrying the threat of immense institutional power. He bypassed Elias entirely. "You are the recruiter. What is your rank?" "Staff Sergeant Ramos, sir. United States Marine Corps." Ramos stood taller now, his posture shifting from relaxed observer to immovable sentinel. "Staff Sergeant, fine. Let's discuss this contract," Marcus began, pulling out his phone. "I am Marcus Vance. I specialize in contract law. My son is 18. He signed this commitment under duress and without parental consent. Furthermore, I believe there are several avenues under the delayed entry program for a contract of this nature to be voided, especially given the extraordinary academic opportunities he is forfeiting. We are prepared to use every legal and political resource at our disposal." Eleanor, tears still damp on her cheeks, put a hand on Elias's arm, not in comfort, but restraint. "Elias, honey, this is ridiculous. Tell him you were being impulsive. Tell him this is a phase. We'll book a trip to the Cotswolds. You can take a semester off. We'll fix this." Elias gently removed his mother's hand. He looked at the two men, the lawyer representing the world of wealth and abstract power, and the staff sergeant representing the world of iron commitment and physical consequence. "Mom, Dad, this isn't a phase, and the contract is binding," Elias said. Ramos looked at Marcus, his expression completely neutral. "Mr. Vance, your son is an adult under the law. He signed a legal document with the US government. I assure you there was no duress. We are scrupulously thorough about that." Elias scored a 99 on the ASVAB. He understands contracts. He understands his commitment. Marcus's jaw worked, the initial shock giving way to contempt. "I understand what you do. You target vulnerable young men and sell them a fantasy. We'll arrange for a significant donation to a relevant fund. or perhaps a conversation with our congressman. You release him from the DEP immediately, or I promise you, I will make your life a very detailed bureaucratic misery. Ramos didn't flinch. He spoke slowly, addressing the ground between them. Mr. Vance, I signed my contract 15 years ago. My value and the value of your son isn't determined by your checking account or your political connections. Elias has committed to becoming a Marine. The only person who can break that contract now is your son, and only under very specific, non-negotiable terms. I suggest you talk to him, not to me. He stepped back and looked Elias in the eye. We're done here, Vance. I'll see you for the final muster in 3 weeks. And if your parents have any legal questions, they can consult the number on the top right of the DD Form 41, which I presume you still have. With that, Ramos gave Elias a final sharp salute, a private moment of recognition that thrilled Elias to his core, climbed into the Charger and drove away, leaving the Vances alone with the sound of their shattered expectations. The drive home was conducted in absolute silence. The air in the Mercedes S-Class colder than any debate floor Elias had ever walked. Eleanor sat rigidly in the passenger seat, occasionally emitting a small, wounded sound like a bird with a clipped wing. Marcus drove, his knuckles white against the mahogany wheel, his eyes fixed on the perfectly manicured road. The Vance estate was a triumph of suburban architectural restraint, a modern glass and steel structure that looked less like a home and more like a think tank. Inside, everything was pristine, geometric, and expensive. It was a space designed for quiet, intellectual triumph, not messy, emotional defiance. As they entered the massive, open-plan living room, Marcus stopped and turned, finally fixing Elias with his full, terrifying attention. "Sit down, Elias," he ordered, his voice still low but amplified by an authority that had never before failed him. Elias remained standing in the center of the polished concrete floor, still wearing the black gown that now felt like armor instead of a costume. "No, Dad, we're not doing this sitting down. We're going to talk about this as adults," Elias said. Eleanor sank onto a cream-colored sofa, finally finding her voice. It was thick with tears. "Talk? Elias, what is there to talk about? You have thrown away Harvard. You have made a mockery of every opportunity we worked for. This is a slap in the face to your mother, to your family name, to everything you represent." "I don't represent any of that, Mom. I acted like I did," Elias countered, the words tumbling out, fueled by 6 months of suppressed truth. "I was following a script. I excelled at the script. I just decided I don't want the prize." Marcus cut her off, transitioning seamlessly from domestic anger to professional strategy. "The prize is financial and intellectual freedom, Elias. You are trying to trade it for servitude. Let's be clinical. This is what you excel at, analysis. What is your endgame here?" "My endgame is to earn my place, to not just talk about grit and leadership, but to experience it. I want to test my limits. I want a purpose that exists outside of a corporate spreadsheet," Elias said. "Purpose," Marcus scoffed, stepping closer. "Purpose can be purchased and directed. This isn't about purpose. It's about spite. You think this is some grand gesture of rebellion? It's just idiocy." Marcus took out his phone again, but this time he wasn't making a call. He pulled up an email. The initial threat to the staff sergeant was necessary rhetoric, but let's look at the facts. You signed a DEP contract. You are not yet in the active duty service. There are legal off-ramps. We have 2 weeks until your ship date. I've already drafted a letter of intent to Senator Reynolds. I will also contact the legal department at the Pentagon. He looked up, his eyes hard. "Your medical records, Elias, tell me there is nothing we can use there. Allergies, an old injury, anything that was waived by that sergeant? We can have that contract voided due to fraud on the recruiter's part. Minor omission of a disqualifying condition." A terrible realization dawned on Elias. His father wasn't angry, he was working. He was treating Elias's life choice like a hostile business acquisition that needed to be dismantled. "There's nothing, Dad," Elias said, shaking his head. "I was obsessively honest with the doctors. I wanted to go. I don't have a loophole." Eleanor rose from the sofa, the tears now giving way to an accusing firmness. "If you won't help your father save you, then we'll save you ourselves. We are not spending the next 4 years watching the news, hoping your purpose doesn't get you killed for $30,000 a year. It's not about the money. It is always about the money, Elias. It's about stability, safety, and influence. Everything you are throwing away is built on that." Marcus roared, finally losing the strategic cool. "Do you understand the level of embarrassment you've inflicted on us? The alumni board called me before I left the commencement grounds." Elias looked from his mother's distraught face to his father's furious red face. They were united in their shock and their goal, control. "I understand," Elias said quietly, decisively. "But you need to understand something too. For 18 years, your leverage over me was simple. I needed your signature, your tuition money, and your approval. I don't need any of those things anymore. The contract I signed gives me independence from you. You can try to lobby Congress, but you can't force me onto that plane to Boston, and you can't stop me from getting on the bus to Paris Island." Marcus stared at him, genuinely unable to comprehend this new, autonomous version of his son. The Gold Star had finally walked out of the museum. "Fine," Marcus bit out, retreating into the fortress of his home office. "You have 2 weeks. You will stay here. You will not communicate with that staff sergeant. We will explore the legal remedies. If you truly wish to destroy your future, Elias, you will have to look me in the eye and make that decision on the morning of your ship date." The 2 weeks that followed graduation were not a period of mourning, but of domestic siege. The Vance home became a prison of glass and quiet coercion. Elias's credit cards were cut off. His passport was removed from his room, and his primary smartphone was replaced with a basic flip phone, ostensibly for security reasons, but transparently to prevent communication with Ramos. Elias adapted with the same clinical efficiency he had applied to the AP curriculum. He had anticipated the financial measures. His primary fear was always the legal maneuvering. He knew Marcus would try to find the smallest clerical error or medical detail to justify a fraudulent enlistment claim. He waited 3 days, allowing the initial furor to settle into a predictable pattern of silent dinners and brief hostile updates from his father's home office. On the 4th morning, Elias told his parents he was going for a run, a habit they encouraged for its discipline and structure. He jogged 2 miles to a hidden drainage culvert under a highway overpass, a space he'd discovered during his early clandestine Marine prep training. From the bottom of his running shoe, where he had carved out a hollow, he retrieved a small, encrypted thumb drive. "Your father is contacting people we expected. The contract is ironclad, but stay focused. No communications with the center. Do not do anything to jeopardize your personal health or legal standing. Be boring, run long, read the book. See you in 13 days. Read the book." The book was the Marine Corps guidebook, which Elias had already committed to memory. The message was clear. Maintain physical readiness, avoid conflict, and trust the process. The legal siege continued. Marcus, looking increasingly haggard, would sometimes corner Elias, showing him printouts of case law. "Do you see this, Elias?" Smith versus Department of Defense 2011. If we can prove you were given inaccurate information about your eligibility, this whole thing collapses. Elias would simply respond with the same unyielding calm. Dad, I passed all medical requirements and all psychological screenings. I didn't lie about anything. There is no legal fault on my part or on the Marine Corps. You're trying to prove a contract is invalid because you don't like its terms. The emotional siege from Eleanor was far more draining. She would leave articles about the hazards of military service open on his bedside table or stand in his doorway, gazing at him with an expression of profound, terminal grief. "We just wanted you to be safe, Elias," she whispered late one night. "We wanted you to use that extraordinary mind for creation, not for destruction." "I intend to create, Mom," he had replied. "I intend to create a life that feels authentic to me." He knew he was hurting them, but the pain was the necessary consequence of his own freedom. He was counting down the hours, not the days. On the 10th day of the siege, Elias needed one last clean breath of his old life. He decided to visit Northwood Academy under the pretense of retrieving a forgotten trophy for his father, which Marcus might actually check up on. The school was quiet, the halls smelling faintly of disinfectant. Elias found Ms. Albright, the guidance counselor, in her office, already packing up the year's files. She looked up, her expression tired but astute, instantly recognizing the tension radiating from the former golden boy. "Elias, to what do I owe this visitation? I assumed the legal teams were already fielding calls from the Pentagon, not that you were returning for a misplaced copy of the Aeneid." She gestured toward a chair. Elias sat down, sensing a moment of genuine privacy. "I'm looking for the debate team Spirit of the Competition Award. It's insignificant, but my father asked for it." Ms. Albright leaned back, steepled her fingers and stared at him. She was an academic, a lover of logic and clear communication, and she cut through the pretense immediately. "Cut the Vance rhetoric, Elias. Your father is trying to save you from himself. I know. He called the Dean of Admissions at Harvard personally, saying this was a temporary crisis of judgment. I told the dean that if I had to choose one student most likely to excel under extreme, self-imposed discipline, it would be you." Elias felt a genuine surprise. "You support this?" "Support? No, I understand," she corrected. "You've spent 4 years meticulously performing a life based on your parents' ambition. You achieved perfection, and you realized perfection is a cage. You are choosing a path that requires you to strip away the veneer and become essential. That's a fundamentally logical choice for a mind like yours." She pushed a small, worn volume of poetry across the desk. It was Dulce et Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen, a bleak poem about the horror of World War I. "I teach this every year. It's a necessary counterpoint to the romantic view of conflict," she said, her voice dropping. "Elias, I need you to know 2 things. 1, you are the smartest student I have ever had. Your mind is a fortress. 2, the Marine Corps will try to break that fortress down and rebuild you. Don't let them take the part of you that asks why. Don't stop reading and don't stop thinking. You chose the infantry. It will be brutal. You go there to learn grit, but you come back to use your mind." She stood up and walked around the desk, stopping in front of him. This was not the nervous guidance counselor from the stage. This was a scholar giving a final, vital lesson. "Your father believes he can buy your way out. You know he can't. But you, Elias, you can walk away, right now, before the bus, and no one could blame you." Elias stood, holding the poetry book. It felt heavier than his diploma. "I won't walk away, Ms. Albright." She nodded once, a gesture of respect rather than approval. "Good. Then you'll be fine. Now go get that irrelevant trophy, and for God's sake, don't forget to send a postcard. Address it to Ms. Albright, Guidance Office, Northwood Academy. I want to know where the intellectual armored tank goes next." As Elias walked out of the school, the trophy box in one hand and the heavy poem in the other, he realized that the last tether to his old world was not his parents or his accolades, but that genuine, unsentimental moment of understanding. He had passed his final exam. The final morning arrived with the inevitability of a calendar event. Elias awoke at 0500, not needing an alarm. The house was already awake. Marcus and Eleanor were sitting in the dining room, dressed, stiff, and prepared for the final confrontation. A lawyer, Mr. Chen, sat beside Marcus, a briefcase closed on the table. "Elias," Marcus began, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, "Mr. Chen has arrived. We have secured a temporary injunction from a district judge based on the principle of caveat emptor regarding the DEP program, arguing that the contract failed to adequately disclose the full opportunity cost of your enrollment. If you come with us to the courthouse, you can sign the paperwork and this all ends." Elias stood across the table. He wore the comfortable, slightly worn clothes Ramos had instructed him to wear: athletic shorts, a plain t-shirt, and running shoes. His possessions were in a small duffel bag by the door. "That injunction will be dismissed by the end of the day, Dad. It's a stall tactic, not a resolution. It won't stand up to federal review, you know this. It buys time, Elias, time to rethink, time to get on a plane to Boston," Marcus insisted, his eyes pleading, no longer strategizing. Elias looked at Mr. Chen, the lawyer, who avoided his gaze, clearly uncomfortable being dragged into this domestic war. "I appreciate your effort, Mr. Chen, but I'm not coming with you," Elias said. Eleanor stood up, finally breaking the silence she'd maintained for days. She walked to Elias, her eyes brimming with a desperate clarity. "Elias, we love you. We are terrified. If you leave today, we won't know where you are. We won't be able to contact you. We won't be able to send you anything. You will be cut off." This was the raw, unedited truth, not about Harvard, but about fear. "I know, Mom," Elias said, and he hugged her fiercely. It was the first genuine physical contact they'd shared in months. "But I'm not leaving you forever. I'm just leaving this life. I need to be a part of something bigger than the Vance name." He pulled back and looked at his father. "Dad, you taught me to identify opportunity, to commit fully, and to never settle for less than the maximum possible return on investment. I've done all three. My return on this investment isn't financial, it's personal, and it's worth more than Harvard." Marcus stood slowly. He walked over to the front door and opened it. A black van was parked discreetly down the street. Ramos was not in it. There was only a quiet, uniformed driver. "You have 2 minutes until the ride is gone," Marcus said, his voice flat. He didn't look at Elias. "You are making the biggest mistake of your life, son." Elias picked up his duffel bag. He looked one last time at the sterile, immaculate house that had been his golden cage. "No, sir," Elias said, his voice completely steady. "The biggest mistake of my life would have been staying." He walked out the door and didn't look back, closing the door on the sound of his mother's muffled sob and the impotent rage of his father. He was gone. The valedictorian had traded his gown for a uniform.